In this video, we're going to take a look at the Mod Duo X user profiles and system settings. User profiles allow you to switch between pre-configured device settings. Let's say you'd like to use the Mod Duo X on stage as well as in the studio. However, for each scenario, you would need to have different input and output configurations and maybe also volume settings. So the user profile can be used to quickly recall your pre-configured settings for each particular scenario. In this scenario, we have a drum machine. The drum machine outputs are connected to the inputs of the Mod Duo X. The MIDI output of the drum machine is connected to the MIDI input of the Mod Duo X. And the outputs of the Mod Duo X are connected to the studio speakers. To access the user profile, click and press the left endless encoder, and then scroll down to user profiles. The current user profile is already set to Profile A. In Profile A, the stereo link function is active on both the input and output. The CV expression input is set to be a control voltage input, and the expression mode is set as signal on ring. The CV headphone output is set to have your headphones connected. Lastly, the master volume link is set to be the same on both output channels. The sync and MIDI configurations are set such that the clock source is internal and the send MIDI clock function of the Mod Duo X is not active. Since I'd like the drum machine to be the master clock in this particular setup, I will scroll down to System Settings, and under the clock source setting, you can see that you have three options: internal, MIDI, and Ableton Link. In this case, I'll set the clock source to MIDI. In User Profile B, line level input and CV is enabled. The stereo link function is active on both the input and output. The CV expression input is set to be a control voltage input, and the expression mode is set as signal on ring. The CV headphone output is set to have your control voltage output, which will allow you to send control voltage messages from the Mod Duo X to other devices able to receive control voltage values. The master volume link is set to be the same on both output channels of the Mod Duo X. The sync and MIDI configurations are set such that the clock source is internal and the send MIDI clock function is not active. In User Profile C, the stereo link for the input is not active. Input 2 has no gain, whereas Input 1 has a gain with 70%. This gain is ideal to connect a mono microphone to your Input 1. The CV expression input is set to be a CV input, and the expression mode is set as signal on ring. The outputs are set to stereo link, and the output volume is set at 100%. The CV headphone output is set to have your headphones connected and set to a volume of 60%, and the master volume link is set to be the same on both output channels. The sync and MIDI configurations are set such that the clock source is internal and the send MIDI clock function is not active. In User Profile D, the stereo link function for the inputs is not active. Input 2 has a 0% gain, whereas Input 1 has a gain of 20%. This gain level is ideal to connect instruments such as guitars, basses, or monosynths to Input 1. The CV expression input is set to be a CV input, and the expression mode is set as signal on ring. The stereo link for the outputs is active, and both outputs are set to a maximum volume at 100%. The CV headphone output is set to have your headphones connected and is set to a volume of 60%, whereas the master volume link is set to be the same on both output channels. The sync and MIDI configurations are set such that the clock source is internal and the send MIDI clock function is not active. In the system settings of the Mod Duo X, you're able to access 7 different menus covering inputs, outputs, sync and MIDI, Bluetooth device settings, general information, and system upgrades. Click on the menu title using the right encoder to dive into the menu settings. In the input settings, you have access to activate or deactivate the stereo link, adjust the gain settings of inputs 1 and inputs 2, adjust the gain settings of input 1 and input 2, or to select between control voltage or expression for the input jack of the CV expression input. Lastly, you can choose what the expression mode is for expression pedals, either being signal on ring or signal on tip. Under the output system settings, you can set the stereo link to be on or off. You can set the output volume as a percentage for output 1 and output 2. You can set the headphone volume to be a percentage between 0 and 100%. And you can set the CV headphone output to be either a headphone output or to have CV functionality. Lastly, you can set the master volume link for both outputs 1 and 2, or for output 1 or output 2 respectively. The sync and MIDI settings allow you to set the clock source of the Moduo X to send MIDI clock from the Moduo X to other devices that can receive MIDI clock. The Snapshot NAV MIDI channel allows you to set up the MIDI channel to listen for program changes in order to navigate snapshots. Pedalboard NAV MIDI channel allows you to select the MIDI channel to be used with an external controller in order to change a pedalboard. The Bluetooth menu settings allow you to check the status of the Bluetooth connection, and also allow you to enable the discovery mode should you wish to connect a Bluetooth device to the Moduo X. The device settings menu allows you to set things such as the display brightness and contrast, as well as how the knobs and buttons behave on the Moduo X. The info menu shows several different pieces of information about your device, including the services running, the version of the Moduo X software, and the serial number of your device. Finally, the system upgrade menu is only meant for maintenance purposes. In regular situations, all software upgrades can be performed via the Web GUI interface.